Okay, so here we have, take this out of here. Here we have the chainsaw components, which consist of this one here. Number one is the drive link. That's what contacts the sprocket and both ends of the chain, or both ends of the bar, to actually obviously drive the saw chain. And they sit way down in the guide bar rails. And this one here is what they call a preset strap, and then you have the tie strap that sets the preset. So this is actually what connect the drive links to the cutters. And you measure a chain by, one, how many drive links it has. So you count these, and it'll show up on a bar like this. It's pretty hard to see, but this bar says 050 325 66, which would look like this. 050 inch 66 drive length, 0325. Those are your drive links. This is your pitch and gauge. Now, to measure your pitch, you take the distance between three cutters, or I'm sorry, three rivets. And divide that by 2. So these are the main components of the chain itself. And you can see there's a tie strap. I'm sorry, preset. There's the tie strap. Here's a short chunk put together with a cutter and drive links. Now moving on to the types of chain, most common types of chain. And we'll stick away from this for now. But most commonly you'll see what they call semi-chisel, round chisel, which is most commonly referred to as just a chisel chain or a full chisel, and then square chisel. And the difference between the three is this area right here and this area right here. And what I mean by that is a chisel chain or a round chisel looks like this, and the face of the cutter has a nice, I wouldn't say square, but pointed edge. It's less than a 90-degree angle. But now notice how it's a nice hard edge here. Where a semi chisel, and I'll use this old 1950s half-inch chain, which hasn't been made in probably 50 years, to demonstrate the round chisel, or I'm sorry, back off that and say semi-chisel, which denotes, look at this other, instead of having a nice hard edge here. It is rounded off, and that's for a one. They usually call them low kickback. There's different types of low kickback which have extra. Let's see if I had one here. They have extra pieces on the drive link to not allow the chain to go too deep. But not only for low kickback, but this will stay sharper longer than a square chisel. However, it will never cut as fast because of the difference, the amount of surface area that's here, which is more than the amount of surface area that is here, which is less, which means there's less material to drag through the wood, the product, whatever you're cutting. Now and the only difference between the round chisel or just regular chisel chain and the square chisel is how it's cut in this area right here. And a full chisel or a full race chisel will actually be cut out all the way down there. And here again, not only is it less material to bring through the wood, but it will cut faster because of that, and the fact that if you actually, let me get this other picture here. If you actually turn the saw over, or the blade over, like it would be inside the cut. Excuse me. That's the direction of travel. As it comes in contact with the wood, it actually will rotate and catch as it pushes, as the leading edge here, which is the leading edge of the cutter, grabs the product or the wood, the material, it'll pull it in. But back to the point on the square chisel, square ground, it would look something like this, and this area here would be gone. And that not only is less material to go through the wood, but as the physical friction or drag of the chain going through the wood, and the material is going to be having to be shed through this channel here. So your wood comes in this way, your chain's going this way, the cutter's going to cut and it's going to peel it off and all the way down, and as it flows through this area here, and I made a total mess of this picture, as it flows through that area here, it has less of a, see if I can get it another, it has less restriction because there's less material, therefore makes it cut faster in that way too. Where if you can see, I don't know if you can see on this cutter here, but this is gone here, and so when you look at it this way, the chips can actually physically flow through that area faster. So that's the different types of cuts in chain chisel. Now there's, in firewood cutting or just regular tree trimming, there's a few different size, like it had on there, the low 3/8 low profile LP, which is going to be this style here, which is small. then you're going to have 3/2/5 pitch, which would be this size here, and that's the smaller the chain, obviously the smaller the bar, smaller the saw. Then the next is going to be 3/8, or it's also called in decimal form 3/7/5. And there's some variances on that. And the last common, and it's really not even that common, is 4/04 pitch. This is for a lot of big saws, or you'll see if people are using it, their chainsaw is a sawmill. It's a very big chain, and therefore I got the wrong chain in there. I'm sorry. There's 3/8. Therefore, it stays sharper longer for longer cutting periods, and the chain physically lasts longer because of the extra material. So inside that, so this is all pitch. So inside that, the most common is for gauge, and what the gauge is going to be the thickness of your drivers, and that is going to be this area right here, which actually sits down inside the guide bar channel, like so. And you'll notice here, I can't hardly shove this one down. So this one probably is, there's 3 main types, or 3 main thicknesses. You'll have what we had mentioned earlier, 050, and then 058, 063. This is most commonly steel chain, and these are Oregon, Husky, etc. So obviously you want to pay very close attention. This will show up. To not only how long the chain is and how big it's got to be, but also the gauge, because you don't want it, this is dangerous obviously with all this friction, but you also don't want it inside an 06, it probably is 063, here we'll use this as an example. You also don't want it where and this is slightly exaggerated obviously, but you don't want it too loose where you have all this sideways twisting slop. That's not safe, nor is it conducive for proper cutting. So this is, I apologize. So those are, for the most part, except for that low profile, new chains. Here we'll look at this. This guy here is pretty much a clapped out turd. You just notice how there's hardly any area left on the top edge of the cutter, and the cutter gauge is almost ground down. And also there'll be a lot of wear on the tie straps and presets, and there'll be a lot of movement back and forth laterally. So this chain is although sharp, best used for scrap or possibly emergency chain. And the same way with this one that we had in earlier with the low profile, there is not much left to it. If you can notice the difference again with a new chain, how much cutter area is on the top. Now, one more demonstration on chains, and then we'll do a quick one on bars and what you need to look for as far as wear on bars, because almost as, or probably as important as having a good sharp chain that properly fits, you also need the bar to properly fit. So here we have what I've magically transformed into a round ground full chisel. Now this here, and usually I think almost everybody's starting to do it now, but this line right here is usually ground into the top, or not, I'm sorry, it's laser etched so you can see it there. And what that is, there we can see it. And the purpose that serves is for when sharpening, you will put your chain, let's say we're going to sharpen it on the saw, and that does not even fit in there, so I'm done. You'll put your chain on the saw, and you'll use you'd have your file inside this because it helps set your gauge or your depth, but then you'll also, most chains are ground to a 30-degree angle at a right angle from the chain. So if you you'll see that when you have your file, it will be positioned in here. This is not the right one for this. So your file will be positioned in here, and it will be perpendicular, as in a right angle to the bar, and that line that was on the top comes in. Most of them are ground at a 30-degree angle, and that helps guide you as you sharpen the top of the chain. The other most important part of a chain that often is overlooked is this leading edge of the cutter right here, the cutter link, not the cutter itself. And usually that'll have a stamped in line in it as well. And this right here is what they call the raker. And the raker sets depth. And depth as far as from the top of the cutter edge to the top of the raker is how much material on each pass the chainsaw chain cutter will take. Now obviously, if it's too deep, you're going to be gouging a bunch of wood, and that's going to be catching the chain and stopping the chain and binding the chain. If you cut too shallow, because as this angle goes back, it goes down. So when your chain has been used and the leading edge of the cutter is now back here, like we've seen on some of those clapped out turds, this here, you're barely taking, you're taking this much material off, right? About the thickness of that, versus this much material. And what that'll do is give the evidence, I guess, of to the operator if it doesn't know, or if you look at the saw chips, which will probably be almost dust, that this chain is dull, which is not always the case. This cutter can be razor sharp, and if that raker is set too high, it doesn't matter how sharp it is if it can't get in there and allow the cutter to do its job. So kind of a vice versa of too deep. So every time that you sharpen a chain, it's highly recommended to go with a simple little tool like this, which is called a depth gauge. And that slips over the tooth much like this, and then this little fork slides up into and behind the raker. Now obviously this is a new chain, so it's going to be set properly. So I'm gonna tip the back of it up so you can see. There we go. Now you take your flat file from that and you grind the top or file the top off. Then after you file the top off, you want to take which is that stamped edge and copy it to where you have about the same angle, the same pitch is what is right out of the box from the manufacturer. If you don't do that and you have a square edge, the chain will chatter your teeth and vibrate your hands and prematurely wear just about every component on the saw. Chain and bar and saw. Now just like with different size chains, you have different size files. Different types of files. So the flat file is for that. And obviously this would be for square ground, or one similar like this, so that would give you that tight corner and tight edge inside this radius here. You would not have a radius, you would have an angle. Now this would be, this is 404, and this is actually for 404, and you'll see how that round ground fits that radius, like so. And same way with, it'd be 325, 3/8, and 3/8 low profile. I believe still uses this one. I don't sharpen a lot of those. So there is a chain and bar. And oh, by the way, this is a handy little tool to keep in for picking, and you put it down inside the guide and pull out any debris. That's a brand new chain, so obviously it's not going to have much debris, but this one probably will. Apparently I cleaned it. And you can see. So this is a brand new chain, a brand new bar. See, there's still paint on the rail edges. It's your sprocket, rail edge. This is where your mount goes, the two bars usually that you tighten it down. And this is the tension screw adjuster. And this one is awful narrow in the back. Usually you'll see something like this. And what that is the oil hole that goes straight into the inside of the guide bar. And that allows oil to get down in on your chain. Now, this here new bar, you'll notice, has everything on the end and on the rails is nice and square. Now this one, which is a hard nose, but it's the one I found the best example, you get some cupping in here, and this is where, as you can see down, hopefully you can see in there that it is not square, and the middle where the chain rides has done and gone down in like this. Over exaggerated here. Has cupped out like that, and the chain running inside this area. This one here, see how the light shows up on the edge? Has a lot of rollover, and this is probably well past its useful life. And another common thing that will make a saw cut funny and be attributed to either one side of the chain being cut wrong or not is this right here. I'm going to try and get it in here the best I can. You can see, hopefully, what is going on here. You're not going to be able to see it. Just to explain it. This side of the bar is higher than this side, which is going to create the chain to twist to one side, which is going to create the saw to cut. So if your log, and it really shows up in thicker logs that are closer to the size of the chain are bigger. So as you start your cut down, whichever one is lower, it's going to cause the chain to move in the opposite direction. So instead of cutting straight coming out the bottom, you'll get about 2/3 of the way through the log and the bar will pinch and bind. So you take a grinder or a sander or a file, whatever you're most comfortable with, and return the rails to square, flat. And if you can't, then that bar is retired, because they not only when they grind like that, as you can see in this one, hopefully, that is what has been going on with this. Not only has it cupped it here and worn it, but it's also, if you think of it this way, this is how it normally was. Let's do a new one. So if a normal saw guide bar, that is even worse than the first one. So say this is nice and square and even. So if that's what a normal guide bar looks like, and here's your chain, sits on top of it, down in the channel. If this area here is gone, it's going to cause this chain not only to run deeper down into here, but it's going to allow for side-to-side movement like we talked about later or earlier, and actually not even rotating, but actual 100% side-to-side movement inside. And that's very dangerous, I guess. No, it's dangerous for the fact of throwing a chain, and you're not going to get a good cut, and you're not going to have a sharp chain, and it's just not going to be right. So that is the basics. We have next will be physically sharpening the chain.